The storm raged outside as Mark Anderson sat alone in his office, the rain hammering against the windows of his small, cluttered apartment. Thunder growled in the distance, but Mark barely noticed. He was too focused on the email he had received earlier that day, an email that had no sender, no subject line, and no traceable origin. Just a single sentence. "Do you remember what happened in the old house?" The words had haunted him all day. Mark hadn't thought about the old house in years. Not since he was 10. Not since his family had moved out so suddenly in the middle of the night, leaving everything behind. His parents had never talked about it, never given him a reason why they left, and he had buried the memory deep until now. Mark had spent the last few years chasing mysteries for his blog, writing about urban legends, haunted places, and strange occurrences. But the old house? That was something he had never written about, never even spoken of. It was personal, and now someone else knew about it. He couldn't shake the feeling that this email wasn't just a coincidence. He had to go back. 2 days later, Mark found himself standing at the edge of a gravel driveway, staring at the old, weathered house from his childhood. It was just as he remembered, gray, crumbling, with peeling paint and ivy creeping up the sides like fingers. It looked abandoned, forgotten by time, much like the memories he had of it. But there was one thing he didn't remember: a window on the second floor. A window that, as a child, he had never seen before. It was boarded up now, but Mark could still make out its shape, tucked in the shadow of the house's gabled roof. His parents had always told him there were only 3 rooms upstairs: his bedroom, their room, and a storage closet. So, why had he never noticed that window before? What was behind it? The front door creaked as he pushed it open, the smell of damp wood and decay hitting him instantly. The house had been abandoned for decades, and it looked it. Dust coated every surface, and the floorboards groaned under his weight. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the distant drip of water from somewhere deeper inside. He walked through the familiar rooms, memories flickering like old film reels. The kitchen where his mother used to make dinner, the living room where his father had sat reading the paper. Everything looked smaller now, faded, almost unreal. But upstairs, that was where the real mystery lay. The stairs creaked loudly as he climbed them, the dim light from his flashlight casting long shadows on the walls. His heart pounded with every step. The hallway stretched before him, lined with old family photos, the faces staring back at him with ghostly familiarity. His bedroom was exactly how he remembered it, though dust-covered and hollow, like a shell of its former self. His parents' room stood next to it, the bed still made, untouched for years. And at the end of the hall, the closet, where his family stored old clothes and boxes of forgotten items. But as Mark stood in front of the closet door, he felt a strange sense of unease. The door was slightly ajar, and something in the air seemed different, like the house was holding its breath. He hesitated, then slowly pulled the closet door open. Inside, the space was smaller than he remembered, lined with shelves full of dust-covered boxes. But something else caught his eye, something he had never noticed as a child. At the back of the closet, hidden behind a stack of old newspapers, was a small wooden door, no taller than his waist. It wasn't there before. He was sure of it. Heart racing, Mark knelt down and touched the handle. The wood was cold, almost unnaturally so, and a shiver ran up his spine. Taking a deep breath, he turned the knob and pulled the door open. The dark space beyond was not just a crawl space, as he expected. It was a narrow, steep staircase leading down into the bowels of the house, a place that, by all logic, shouldn't have existed. His flashlight beam barely penetrated the darkness. Mark swallowed hard. This wasn't part of the house he knew. His parents had never mentioned anything like this. Why would they? They had left so suddenly, and they had never told him why. With each step down into the hidden passage, The air grew colder, and a low hum seemed to vibrate through the walls. As he reached the bottom, he realized he was in a room completely unfamiliar, with stone walls and a damp, earthen floor. It wasn't just a forgotten part of the house. It felt older than the house itself. The room was almost empty, save for one thing. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror. Its frame was made of dark, twisted wood, and the glass reflected nothing but darkness. Mark stepped closer, his breath coming in shallow gasps. There was something off about the mirror, something that drew him in, made his skin prickle with unease. The closer he got, the more the air seemed to buzz, like static on an old TV. And then, as he stood directly in front of it, the reflection shifted. It wasn't his face staring back at him. It was a younger version of himself, a child, standing alone in the dark room, eyes wide with fear. He took a step back, but the reflection didn't change. The younger version of him smiled, a twisted, eerie smile that didn't belong on the face of a child. Mark's heart hammered in his chest as the reflection's mouth moved, whispering words he couldn't hear, couldn't understand. The air around him seemed to tighten, pulling him closer to the glass. Suddenly, he remembered something he had forgotten for years. A memory buried deep. The night they left the house. He had heard voices coming from the walls. His parents had rushed him out, told him never to speak of it again. And then they had never spoken of the house, never returned, never explained. But now, standing here in this room that shouldn't exist, looking into a mirror that showed him things that couldn't be real, he understood. The house hadn't been empty. It had been waiting for him to come back. The mirror rippled, the reflection reaching out, its hand pressing against the glass as if trying to break through. Mark stumbled backward, his mind racing, the words from the email flashing through his head. Do you remember what happened in the old house? He had blocked it out for years, but now the house wanted him to remember. The reflection leaned closer, its voice finally breaking through the silence. Come home, Mark. And in that moment, Mark knew he was never leaving the house again. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit like and subscribe for more tales that take you into the darkest corners of your mind. What would you do if your past came back to haunt you? Let us know in the comments below.